Saturn, his personality, power, and overthrow by Edward McIntyre Bounds. Chapter 12 Exposed Positions. The Battle of Calvary. The conflict of Gethsemane closed around the first hour of the fourth watch, and the last conflict began immediately in an offensive personal encounter between one of the awakened bodyguard of Jesus and a servant of Caiaphas. The battle went on with heat and vigor when the high priest asked Jesus, "Art thou the Christ, the Son of the Blessed?" And Jesus said, "I am, and ye shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven." The cross is preached. Though pressed on all sides by hell, death, and demons, he provided for his mother. At 2:59 p.m., April 7th, he seemed to have lost the battle and said, "Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. It is finished." He conquered Satan by seeming weakness. He gained the battle of Calvary by a surrender of his life. This is scriptural. Through death, he deposed him who had the power of death, and delivered them who, through fear of death, were all their lifetime subject to bondage. By H.W. Hodge. There are positions and conditions which lie open to the attacks of Satan. These points must be guarded by sleepless vigilance. The devil is a remorseless, cruel, and mighty foe. To watch him with unsleeping eye is not only a duty, but safety to life, deliverance from hell, certainty of heaven. All and more, if more there can be, are involved in overcoming the devil. Stupidity, neglect, being off guard in the conflict with Satan are much more than mistakes or indiscretions. They are fatal undoings, eternal and remediless losses. The apostle places his Corinthian brethren on the vantage ground in the war with the devil by declaring, "We are not ignorant of Satan's devices." Ignorance is always an exposed condition. Ignorance is open to attack and surprise by day and by night. To be ignorant of the existence, character, and ways of the devil is the prelude and prophecy of fatal results in the fight for heaven. If this be true, how hopeless is the case of one who is not only ignorant of the temptations, but denies or ignores the existence of the tempter. The devil's great device, his masterpiece of temptation, is to destroy faith in his own existence. God's struggle is to establish faith. The devil's great work is to eradicate all spiritual facts, principles, and persons, good or evil, God and devil. He who denies or ignores the existence of the devil puts a fatal bar to ultimate salvation, paralyzes all efforts in that direction, and gives one over, chained hand and foot, to the merciless foe whose existence has been denied and derided. Nothing advances Satan's work with more skillful and readier hands than to be ignorant of Satan and his ways. To escape his snare, we must not only have a strong faith in the fact that Satan is, but also must have a most intimate knowledge of him and of his plans and many-sided ways. Much akin to the foregoing exposed position is the one which makes light of Satan. Frivolous views of him, his works, and his character, light talk or dishonoring epithets in the line of jesting, are all detrimental to any serious use of life's great work, its solemn engagements, its serious conflicts, and its weighty hindrances. Presumption, self-will, and foolishness are the characteristics of those who thus deal with these weighty concernments. The existence and work of the devil is a serious matter, and it is to be considered and dealt with from the most serious standpoint, and none but serious people can deal with it. And with this well accords the iterated and reiterated New Testament exhortation and note of warning: be sober. That which gives it point and arousing power is be sober, for your adversary the devil, etc. How germane to this attitude is Jude's nervous, incisive, and almost rough handling of these sacrilegious characters who make light of sacred things and sacred persons. Likewise also these filthy dreamers defile the flesh, despise dominion, and speak evil of dignities. Yet Michael the archangel, when contending with the devil, he disputed about the body of Moses, durst not bring against him a railing accusation, but said, The Lord rebuke thee. But these speak evil of those things which they know not, but what they know naturally, as brute beasts, in those things they corrupt themselves. Peter takes the same class of flippant, irreverent talkers to task, somewhat after the same manner. Presumptuous are they, self-willed. They are not afraid to speak evil of dignities, whereas angels, which are greater in power and might, bring not railing accusation against them before the Lord. But these, as natural brute beasts, made to be taken and destroyed, speak evil of the things that they understand not, and shall utterly perish in their own corruption, and shall receive the reward of unrighteousness, as they that count it pleasure to write in the daytime. Spots they are, and blemishes, sporting themselves with their own deceivings while they feast with you. A paralyzing attitude, a staying to talk, a listening to Satan's insinuations are all fatal. This was Eve's mistake. His tongue is smooth as oil, his words circulate and inflame like poison. Bristling opposition, embattled for war. No inlets, no down bars, no open gates, no low places, all fenced and high, and shut against the devil is the only safety. An unforgiving spirit invites satanic possession. His favorite realm is the spirit. To corrupt that, to incense or provoke to retaliation, revenge, or unmercifulness, that is his chosen work and his most common and successful device. Paul puts it to the front so as to thwart Satan. To whom ye forgive anything, I forgive also. For if I forgive anything, to whom I forgive it, for your sakes forgive it. It is in the person of Christ, lest Satan should gel an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices. When he begets an unforgiving spirit in us, then he has us. We are on his ground. Then wicked men and good men, all kinds of men, are likely to do us harm, sometimes at vital and very sensitive points, sometimes all unconsciously they wrong us, and sometimes knowingly and willfully. They wrong us. As soon as a spirit of unkindness possesses us for the wrong done, Satan has the upper hand. We quote from the Revised Version the warning words of our Savior. Again, you have heard that it hath been said by them of old time, Thou shalt not forswear thyself, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths. But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, or for it is God's throne. Swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Neither shalt thou swear by the head, because thou canst not make one hair white or black. But let your communication be yes, yes, no, no. For whatsoever is more than this cometh of the evil one. The injunction is against strong oaths in language. Expletives and appear and declarings added to our words, all are wrong and expose us to the snare of Satan. In the multitude of words, says Proverbs, there wanteth not sin. Satan tempts us to asseverations and deductions to conform truth which destroy truth. Equivocal words and words by way of substantiating the truth of those already spoken expose us to Satan's power. But above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven nor by the earth, neither by any other oath, but let your yes be yes, and your no be no, lest ye fall into condemnation. So St. James seals the words of Christ. The devil lies concealed in many words. Simplicity, fewness, and seriousness of words mightily hinder and thwart his ensnaring plans. It is so easy for the devil to stop us just a little short of a faith that will save. There are many initials, prefaces, preludes, and introductions which are sometimes quite taxing and are a right good advance in the right direction, but which do not bring us into the heart of the matter. Like Sarah, they start with full intent to go to Canaan but stop at Haran and dwell there. Like Jacob, Shechem stays their steps and holds them instead of Bethel. On the other hand, even those who are earnestly striving after that holiness without which no man shall see the Lord, Satan Saturn tempts them to go a little too far, and their zeal degenerates into party spirit and unhallowed heat. Strict earnestness degenerates into severity, gentleness into weakness, energetic activity into imprudent meddling and narrowness, calm moderation into careless acquiescence, bold decision maintaining its own convictions firmly becomes intolerant, self opinionated, narrow, arbitrary, bigoted. Due regard for the particularities and convictions of others degenerates into paralyzing indifference and skeptical indolence. Lively trust lapses into presumption and haughtiness, a wise prudence into cowardice and hesitating anxiety, and confession and profession degenerate into and evaporate into aridity. So Saturn watches and is alert always and wary to hold us back from the goal or to press us by an impetuous, unkindly, or vehement spirit to go beyond the goal. So all this uncovers often our strongest positions and turns them into exposed conditions. Yoking with unbelievers in the relationship of life ties of friendship and intimate and confiding associations with unbelievers are exposed positions of great peril, and of which devil takes instant and great advantage. Partnership in business, or the more sacred relation of marriage with unbelievers, is perilous to one united to Christ by close ties. Satan is called Belial by the apostle, meaning worthlessness, contemptibleness, wickedness. He and Christ cannot be joined in agreement. No unequal yoking, no fellowship, no communion, no concord. No agreement can exist. All is perilous and mixed. Contamination and impurity result. A maimed, enfeebled holiness is the fruit of this voluntary closing yokings. Under the law, an ox and an ass could not be yoked together. Under the Spirit, Christ and Satan can have no concord. Separation, cleansing, and perfecting holiness are necessary to secure the vantage ground against Satan. How strong, minute, explicit, and comprehensive is the charge here given against union, communion, or intimate association with unbelievers. Unequally yoked, no pulling together, not equal, no fellowship, no sharing, no communion, no intimacy, no concord, no agreement, no part, no portion, no agreement, no voting together. Commentators have found in this great variety of expression Paul's fine command of the Greek language. We find in it the fire of impassioned and profound convictions demanding the most self-denying abstemiousness in forming intimate and voluntary associations with the unbelieving world in the way of business and pleasurable or social pursuits of intimacies. In the way of business and pleasurable or social pursuits and intimacies. This rule he laid down in his first epistle to the Corinthians. I wrote unto you in an epistle not to company with fornicators, yet not altogether with the fornicators of this world, or with the covetous, or extortioners, or with idolaters, for then must ye needs go out of the world. But now I have written unto you not to keep company, if any man that is called a brother be a fornicator, or covetous, or an idolater, or a railer, or a drunkard, or an extortioner. With such a one, no, not to eat, not the casual, courteous Christian intercourse was he objecting to and barring, but the more intimate, voluntary, and social. St. James locates and defines and opposes these affinities and attachments as not only exposed positions, but resulting in the most radical and criminal violation of the holiest relationship. I quote from the Revised Version: Ye adulteresses, know ye not that the friendship of the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore would be a friend of the world maketh himself an enemy of God. By it the marriage vow of God is broken. Dean Alford, commenting on this passage, says, of the world it means men and men's interest, ambitions, and employments, insofar as they are without God. The man who is taken out of the world by Christ cannot again become the friend and companion of worldly men and their schemes for self without passing into enmity with God. God and the world stand opposed to one another, so that a man cannot join the one without deserting the other. He therefore who is minded to be the friend of the world and sets his mind and thought and wish that way must make up his mind to be God's enemy. But must I not be intimate with my relations, and that whether they fear God or not? Has not His providence recommended these to me? Undoubtedly it has, but there are relations nearer or more distant. The nearest relations are husbands and wives. As these have taken each other for better or worse, they must make the best of each other, seeing as God has joined them together. None can put them asunder, unless in case of adultery or when the life of one or the other is in imminent danger. Parents are almost as nearly connected with their children. You cannot part with them while they are young, it being your duty to train them up with all care in the way wherein they should go. How frequently you should converse with them when they are grown up is to be determined by Christian prudence. This also will determine how long it is expedient for children, if it be at their own choice, to remain with their parents. In general, if they do not fear God, you should leave them as soon as is convenient. As for all other relations, even brothers or sisters, if they are of the world, you are under no obligation to be intimate with them. You may be civil and friendly at a distance, but allowing that the friendship of the world is enmity against God, and consequently that it is the most excellent way, indeed the only way to heaven, to avoid all intimacy with worldly men, yet who has resolution to walk therein, who even of those that love or fear God. Whatever it costs thee, flee spiritual adultery. Have no friendship with the world, however tempted thereto by profit or pleasure. Contract no intimacy with the worldly minded man, and if thou hast contracted any such already, break it off without delay. Yea, if thy ungodly friend be dear to thee as a right eye, or useful as a right hand, yet confer not with the flesh and blood, but pluck out the right eye, cut off the right hand, and cast them from thee. It is not an indifferent thing. Thy life is at stake. eternal life or eternal death. And it is not better to go into life having one eye or one hand than having both. And is it not better to go into life having one eye or one hand than having both to be cast into hellfire? However, importuned or tempted thereto, have no friendship with the world. Look around and see the melancholy effects it has produced among your brethren. How many of the mighty have fallen by this very thing? They would take no warning. They would converse, and that intimately, with worldly minded men, till they measured back their steps to earth again. Oh, come out from among them, from all unholy men, however harmless they may appear, and be ye separate, at least so far as to have no intimacy with them. As your fellowship is with the Father and with His Son Jesus Christ, so let it be with those and those only who at least seek the Lord Jesus Christ in sincerity. So shall ye be in a peculiar sense, my sons and my daughters, saith the Lord Almighty. How Satan surrounds us, how strongly he holds us, how he entangles, enchains, and fetters us by the worldly association. We lie in the sweet friendship, the embraces and converse of these worldly ones, while they with the whole world lie in the arms of the wicked one. If simplicity drops out of our faith, our fortifications against Satan are weakened. I am jealous over you with godly jealousy, for I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ. But I fear lest by any means, as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety, so your minds should be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ. Here we have Satan recognized in the serpent and his ability in illusion to fall in Eden, and intimations that he is still busy at his old tricky trade. Satan has such a dexterous and successful hand at deception that Paul was uneasy. The lack of simplicity would be fatal to their purity and faith, as the taste of the forbidden fruit was fatal to Eve, to her purity and obedience, and to paradise. The loss of a little thing, but with it all is lost. An untrained body exposes readily to Satan's assaults. Even the natural, innocent appetites and passions have to be held in with bit and bridle. An apostle was aware of this, but I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. An undisciplined body would hurl Paul from the apostolic heights down to the fearful abyss of apostasy. Two statements are made as to his body: keep under and bring it into subjection. The first means that part of the face under the eyes, a blow on that part of the face, a black and blue spot by the bruise of a heavy blow, restrained and suppressed by heavy blows, and its native power is broken. The second statement means to make a slave of, to treat with severity, to subject to stern and rigid discipline. The apostle sets forth the body as an important fact in the contest for heaven, and teaches us that if it be untrained without the strong, repressing, molding hand of discipline, it becomes an easy prey to the assaults of Satan. After the same order, in the direction of Peter, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. Whom resist steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same afflictions are accomplished in your brethren that are in the world. A listless, drowsy, sleepy, stupid state gives us into Satan's power without a struggle or even a surrender or the decency of a parley. To the same end is the strong injunction of Christ to the drowsy and fainting disciples: watch and pray that ye enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. Satan, his personality, power, and overthrow, by Edward McHenry Bounds, Chapter 13. Exposed Positions. My soul, be on thy guard. 10,000 foes arise. The hosts of sin are pressing hard to draw thee from the skies. Oh, watch and fight and pray. The battle never give over. Renew it boldly every day, and help divine implore. We have two statements in 1 Timothy of serious import regarding to the appointing of men to active and official leadership in the church. The first is against appointing novices to such leadership, not a novice, lest, being lifted up with pride, he fall into the condemnation of the devil. To press young converts to the front, to put immature ones into spiritual leadership, is to blind and puff with pride. It is to put the young convert in an exposed place, where he already falls into the condemnation into which the devil fell through the blinding effects of pride. This is a text which, by its reminiscential reference, is of much value, giving, as it does, credence to the Church's almost universally received opinion that the devil fell through pride, its aspiring and blinding and blasting effects. Let the novitiates be hardened and matured by discipline ere they are put to the front. Staying behind is often a greater cross, as well as a greater virtue, than pushing or being pushed to the front. It is always an unsafe place for faith, till faith has its bread or grows its spurs. Men of questionable reputation placed in church leadership or official position bring reproach and help the devil much in his disgraceful business. Moreover, he must have a good report of them which are without, lest he fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. Men of good character and spotless reputation in the lead of church affairs closes Satan's mouth, cuts off his revenue, and brings his business low. The violation of these two rules in the church control novices in lead, and men whose reputation is not spotless as leaders puts the novices in bad case and increases the bad order of the leaders of questionable repute. The entire church is also put in an exposed conditions, imperiling the whole army. Leaders are standard bearers, conspicuous. They ought to be conspicuous in spotless pity. They ought to be mature in age, sound and advanced in faith and love and sobriety. Gifted, wise, sober, grave, blameless leaders will make the church strong and victorious in the day of battle. Novices in leadership is an exposed condition. Put novices to the rear till sheltered and trained. Bad reputation is a treacherous or cowardly leadership for God's army. Young widowhood in Sabal sadness is an exposed condition. No widower has as keen an eye to invade the sanctities of widowed grief as Satan. Paul writes plainly, he knew the hidden gins of Satan. He writes broadly, tenderly, honestly, with discrimination. Honor widows that are widows indeed. But if any widow have children or nephews, let them learn first to show pity at home and to requite their parents for that is good and acceptable before God. Now she that is a widow indeed and desolate trusteth in God and continueth in supplications and prayers night and day. But she that liveth in pleasure is dead while she liveth. But the young widows refuse, for when they have begun to wax went on against Christ, they will marry having damnation, because they have cast off their first faith. And withal they learn to be idle, wandering about from house to house, and not only idle, but tattlers also, and busybodies, speaking things which they ought not. I will, therefore, that the younger widows marry, bear children, guide the house, give none occasion to the adversary to speak reproachfully. But some are already turned aside after Satan. This salutary advice relieves the sorrow of the young woman and puts her where her heart and hands are full of sweet and sacred responsibilities, and nerve and time and heart are full of taxing toil. Satan has a hard job to work on a person thus filled fully in heart and hands with holy toil, rearing the home and state and church of the future. There are in man what the scriptures term lust, strong natural desires. They are called lusts of the flesh, lusts of the eye, worldly lusts, the lusts of men. These are things of time and sense, which the heart naturally craves after and clamors for. They form the basis of temptation within. A wily and powerful seducer may tempt and lead innocence and purity astray when there is no inward response to his allurements, but these lusts or desires within form the basis and afford the groundwork for Satan's insidious temptations. St. James describes the whole process. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. But every man is tempted when he is drawn away of his own lusts and enticed. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. The term drawn away means to lure forth. To lure forth. The metaphor is from hunting or fishing. As game is lured from its many ranges, so man by lust is allured from the safety of self-restraint to sin. The word enticed means a bite, to catch by bite. The scriptures demand that these lusts or desires be banned and reprobated. We see how Satan and the world are in these lusts. The gospel is a training school in which these lusts are to be denied. For the grace of God that bringeth salvation hath appeared to all men, teaching us that, denying ungodliness and worldly lusts, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world. The solemn declaration is made without qualification or deception, a declarative carrying the force of an imperative demand and also that of a condition. And they that are Christ's have crucified the flesh with the affections and lusts. The whole work of Christ is presented as an engaging and exciting pattern for us to copy in destroying these lusts. For as much then as Christ hath suffered for us in the flesh, Arm yourselves likewise with the same mind. For he that hath suffered in the flesh hath ceased from sin, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh to the lusts of men, but to the will of God. We are taught that these lusts are put in opposition to the will of God. They cannot be yielded to and obey God. No man can serve these two masters. These lusts are the basis and sources of corruption. They war against the soul. We are to put off concerning the former conversation the old man which is corrupt, according to the deceitful lusts, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind, that ye put on the new man, which after God is created in righteousness and true holiness. The war with Satan is much concerned about these lusts. These lustings after the things of time and sense are not wholly destroyed when we are converted to Christ. When we are converted to Christ, they are broken in power, enfeebled more or less, but the remains, the roots of these are there. Like a tree in life, cut down at its stump, they throw up many shoots. It will allow these shoots to remain. They will keep Satan in his work. They who are content to leave the remains of these lusts in them will be hampered by internal conditions. To allow sin or the tendency to sin to remain in us is as fatal as the leaving of the remains of the original natives in the land of Canaan was fatal to the pity, peace, and prosperity of Israel. God's command to Israel was that those nations were to be destroyed completely so as to leave neither root nor branch. Israel's failure to do this was the source of untold evil to them. Exposed conditions, these remaining lusts are as much so as the remains of a decayed and broken tooth are the exposed conditions of toothache or neuralgia. So we are charged. For if ye live after the flesh, you shall die. But if ye through the Spirit do mortify the deeds of the body, ye shall live. In another text we have these words, they that are Christ have crucified the flesh with its affections and lusts. Lust is the larger word in Scripture, including the whole world of active lusts and desires. The affections is not so much the soul's disease in its more active operations as the diseased conditions out of which these spring. The lusts spring from the passions and are nourished by them. They deserve the same punishment as the flesh. All the flesh, the lusts, the affections are crucified. This puts the Christian in the best fortified condition to resist the attacks of the devil. With these lusts remaining, he is but half armed and wholly exposed. Low aims in the spiritual life, satisfaction and quiescence in present conditions and attainments is exposed condition. The devil may visit the highlands and mountain ranges of spiritual elevation, but he makes his home in the lowlands. He will attack the strongest, maturest giant form of pity, but babyhood. There is no safety but in high aims, strenuous effort, and constant advance. It is on the field of low aims and satisfied results that the devil wins his chief victories. A spiritual growth, constant and sure spiritual development is the surest safeguard against Satan's wiles, assaults, and surprises. Constant growth is all eyes and all strength. Satan never finds it asleep. Drowsy nor weak. Onward, upward is the great battle cry. Constant advance is the steel armor in the fight with the devil. Israel lost Canaan by not possessing Canaan. Satan has all the vantage ground when we do not maintain the aggressive. When the Bible sounded the clarion call, "Let us go on unto perfection," it was seeking to arouse a church which had almost immensely in the vigor, manliness, and fighting ability of Christian character by feeding on milk and indulging in the lazy luxury of being children. It raises a standard and marks a point for them to gain. The point is far ahead, but it is a real point, as real as the point at which their steps had been stayed by a ruinous stay. They are called out of the cradle and away from the nursery to the strength, conflicts, and perfection of a royal manhood. The eulogy on Wesley by a great writer of being the first of theological statesmen pays him no high compliment but his spiritual perception. The man of open divine vision in his highest eulogy. And this is evidenced by the fact that he re-echoed the trumpet call of the Bible and sounded it on every key and in every refrain and sought to stir into a forward movement the church and quicken its members to seek an advanced position which had not only dropped out of their experience but out of their hopes and creeds. God gives religion in its beginnings, and these beginnings are glorious, but to be content with the beginnings of religion is to forfeit not only its possibilities but is to leave us opened naked to Satan, a prey to his schemes. Additions to our spiritual capital are the conditions of solvency and of the retaining of the capital, and is a victory over the devil as well. To stand still in any other transitional advanced station is to go backward. The weakness of men is inconstancy to a great aim. The drafts of a long and exhaustive strain are intolerable. The drafts of a long and exhaustive strain are intolerable. We are willing to pay the cost of nerves for a great temporal success, but the price is too dear for religious success. The tendency in religion is to be satisfied with rudiments and to die in infancy. Teething time is a perilous time for spiritual babes. The great sin of the Israelites was hugging the shores and not going up to possess the land. The marvelous glory of their entrance into Canaan paled in the lethargy and timidity of their after advance. A stopping, standing still, a non-growing, non-fighting condition is a position fully exposed to Satan. Many run well, fight well, but at some point their running and fighting cease. At once spiritual development is arrested and the devil moves at once to an easy victory. This spiritual arrest may be at the initial steps or stages of spiritual life. The raptures and triumph of the first stages may arrest advance and cause a standstill while the cradle is not out of sight and the steps are unsteady by baby toddling. It is true that Paul calls the Corinthian saints baby saints, but this was the point where their saintship turned back to carnality and lost its order, sanctity, and strength. Their great sin and backslidings were found in their babyhood. Not that they began as babes, but that they stayed babes. Baby sainthood is the popular sainthood of these days. To begin as babes is well, but to remain babes 40 years is a fearful deformity. It would be well for us if spiritual arrest belonged only to the high religions of spiritual advance. While not a few, doubtless, of those who have received a great spiritual baptism after the grace of conversion have crystallized around this point of advance, the far greater number of people and preachers have crystallized around the initials of grace. We may have some specimens of Christian mummies who in size approach to maturity, but the number of the dwarfed and cradled ones is legion. Spiritual arrest is not confined, though, to the initial steps. Its lifeblood may chill and its step halt at the point of highest advance. Many Christians are so enthusiastic over some marked advance, some higher elevation gained, that they become enchanted with the beautiful and lofty regions and are lulled to sleep, and like Bunyan's pilgrim lose their role and are all unconscious of their loss. And instead of pressing on with tireless steps, they but cover the future with their imaginations, and while their fancies are filled with the rich colorings of their advanced position, their feet have declined and are in the vale again. They are so happy that it is almost impossible to bring them to their senses and make them understand that there is many a weary and toilsome step between their Red Sea deliverance and the promised land, and that even after the desert is crossed and the Jordan divided and the sanctified soil of Canaan pressed by sanctified feet, there is many a battle to be fought and many an enemy to be destroyed before the goodly land is all possessed. A singing and shouting sanctification is good, but if it is not joined with a marching and fighting sanctification, it will sing and shout itself as thin as ghost and as dry as a chunk, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forth to those things that are before. Is the divine process to hold what we have by getting more. Paul's marvelous career was simple, not complex. He sums it up in fighting, running, watching, the three elements of continuous advance. Many a great battle has been lost by the demoralizing effects of the halt caused by a partial victory in the earlier part of the conflict. It is no easy matter to keep place and march in rank when the spoils of a half-gained victory cover the ground. There is no position this side of heaven free from the dangers of spiritual arrest and secure from the devil's attacks. The conflict and vigilance of advance must mark every step till our feet are within the pearly gates. A non-growing pity with an arrested spiritual development. Whether the arrest is in the initial stages or at the more advanced steps, is always and everywhere an exposed position, always vulnerable to Satan's attack.